Good morning, Birmingham Unitarian Church. Welcome to all, whether you are visiting for the first time or have been here many times before. Whether you are joining us here in the sanctuary, remotely via Zoom, or watching this recording later, it is good to connect with you. Today, children will be with us in the sanctuary to hear a story before heading to their activities for the morning. The family room, just to the left in the back of the sanctuary, with audio of the service piped in, is open for parents and children. Care is also available in the nursery on the lower level for infants and children through age 5. By greeting our virtual neighbors, we build a bridge between online and in-person participants. First, we will project on our screen the image of the folks who are currently on Zoom. We ask you to show yourselves and give us a wave. Now, we invite you who are gathered here in person to turn to face the camera at the back of the sanctuary and give the folks on Zoom a wave. If you are with us in person, we invite you to join us after the service for coffee and conversation in Hodis Hall, which is located to the left after you exit the sanctuary. Our newcomer table is a place where visitors and newcomers can meet and chat with members of the congregation and with each other. All are encouraged to drop by. Just look for the colorful sign. If you are with us on Zoom, we invite you to stay on a call for a virtual coffee hour immediately after the service ends. Whenever and however we connect with BUC, we are building this beloved community.
The campus of Birmingham Unitarian Church occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe Council of Three Fires, comprised of the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples. Bloomfield Hills is situated on land ceded in the 1807 Treaty of Detroit. We acknowledge Michigan's 12 federally recognized Native nations, as well as historic indigenous communities in Michigan. We also acknowledge those who were forcibly removed from their homelands, as well as indigenous individuals and communities who live here now. We affirm indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences.
For Unitarian Universalists, the chalice is an important model. The components of this model are the stem, a bowl, and a flame. The stem elevates the bowl. The bowl nurtures the flame. The flame casts light and warmth to the world. As our chalice flame burns this morning, let us consider this. Our principles elevate our community. Our community nurtures love. Love motivates our lives in the world. Please rise as you are willing and able to sing our first hymn. All models are wrong, but some are useful. These are the words of George E.P. Box. If there is such a thing as a famous statistician, George E.P. Box is one. All models are wrong, but some are useful. Early in my career, I created simulations of assembly processes in industry. I was always frustrated that the models could never match the complexity of the assembly plant. All models are wrong, but some are useful. I saw Professor Box's quote for the first time in a class on machine learning about 10 years ago. Since then, these words have taken on meaning well beyond the scope of that class. All models are wrong, but some are useful. I've come to believe that the one aspect of humanity that has made us more successful than most of the other species on our planet is the ability to create models of the world. All models are wrong, but some are useful. This morning I want to tell you a thing or two that I have learned about models, and about one in particular that changed my perspective on life.
So, raise your hand if you have ever tried to peel an orange in one whole piece. Have you ever attempted to try that? Okay, some of you've been a little adventurous. Now, were you successful in peeling the orange in one whole piece? Wow. I'm gonna have to talk to you a little bit more about this after, but because I'm not quite that successful. So, recall back to that time. You peeled the orange, one whole piece. Now, let's say you tried to lay that orange out flat. Does it look like an orange still? Not really. It's not round like an orange anymore, but you can still, you know it came from an orange. Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to do. So, this is the same problem that map makers have when they try to project, or as we say, flatten out, the image or the surface of the Earth, which is also spherical. And when they try to lay it out on a flat piece of paper to give us a visual representation of what our Earth looks like. So you can get an accurate size, you can get an accurate shape, or accurate directions. These are the things that they're striving for. But you can't get all of them at the same time. So the map of our world that we're most familiar with is called a Mercator projection. And it was invented by a person from Europe whose last name was Mercator, and this was a long time ago. It stretches from top and bottom of the globe in a way to help kind of preserve the directions between points on our globe, on our Earth. And it was really, really important to the sailors who would navigate the Atlantic Ocean at the time. So notice how the Atlantic Ocean is more or less centered on the map. Well, this projection isn't accurate in many other ways. What it has done is make the continents in the north and the south seem bigger than the continents at the equator in the middle. You can see that Antarctica, which is actually the second smallest continent on the globe, looks about as big as most of the other continents put together using this particular type of projection. And by using this projection, the country of Greenland looks to be a similar size to the entire continent of Africa. But in reality, Greenland is much, much smaller than Africa. So I mentioned Antarctica. Does anyone, have if I could tell you about how big it is, would you have a good comparison in your mind? Raise your hand. If I told you, how big is Antarctica? All right. Someone's been studying their maps. So here is Antarctica compared to a few other familiar places on our Earth. So it's compared to Australia, here's the United States, and then this is all of Europe. So when we're looking at it with the Mercator projection, it looks pretty big on the map. But I wonder how this affects the way people think about the world when you look at it. What does it make you think about? Perhaps the continents at the equator are portrayed as smaller than they really are from people in the northern hemisphere, and they might think that the people who live near the equator are less important. I hope that's not any of us. So let's look at some other designs of maps for just a second. So this one, well, shout out. What is it? What do you notice? It's upside down, right? Well, so there was a kid in Australia. His name was Stuart MacArthur, and he used to draw maps of the world. He went on to become a map maker, and he put his home country at the center and towards the top, right? It's a little bit different than maybe what we're used to, and that might be a little disorienting, but it seemed way more normal to young MacArthur. And as an adult, he published what we call the MacArthur's Universal Corrective Map of the world to help people see a different perspective. There's also a projection called the Gall-Peters projection, which kind of distorts the shape of the continents as you're moving towards the poles and also in the equator. But what it does give us is that the continents on our flat map are the same area as if they were projected onto a globe, on our sphere. So unfortunately, you don't really want to use this projection if you're trying to sail across the ocean. So directions, they get a little curved and they get a little wonky if you're trying to navigate. But it gives us more of an accurate representation of the land masses. There's yet another projection, and this is called the azimuthal distance projection. So all points in all continents are the same distance from the North Pole that we're looking at here. And, fun fact, this is used by the United Nations. Can you see the resemblance? So in this version, the Earth is seen as if you were above, looking above, from the North Pole, and by centering no one single country and using equal distancing of your projection, they hoped that this would show and signify equality and unity among the member nations. But notice that they left out Antarctica entirely. So I think, though, only penguins and some scientists live there, so hopefully they don't mind too much. Ideally, we'd like to use a globe to represent our world, giving us a more accurate 3D representation of Earth. And our particular globe here, as with other globes as well, you'll notice that it is tilted slightly at 23 degrees from vertical, so it's a little bit tilted. And this is how the Earth is tilted in its orbit around the sun. So this globe, I picked this one because it also gives us some more information that we might not get from just an image or a flat map. So this globe actually has some raised edges to show where the different mountain ranges are. And so for someone who may be blind, they are able to get some information from this globe using that tactile information. However, we all know it's really hard to just carry a globe around with us. And updating globes is a whole process too. This globe, for sure, has some incorrect information, and so there's been a lot of changes to country borders, things like that, even country names. So we tend to stick with maybe something that's on our phone, like a Google map or something like that. So, what can we take away from all of these different maps? Especially in a UU setting, right? Well, perhaps our perspectives are influenced by the ways that they are presented to us, by the way things are presented to us. And perhaps we think about the world differently to other people who live in a different part of the world or have a different map of the world. But we should remember that no matter how your map is created, it is a representation of the same world on which we all live. As Unitarian Universalists, we're called to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. This is our fourth principle. One way to fulfill this is by actively rethinking our own perspectives and striving to understand things from other viewpoints. Whether it's how our world is represented in a two-dimensional space or another person's lived experience, how it shapes their understanding, we are reminded that no one single perspective can capture the full truth. Just as every map projection distorts reality in some way, our own perspectives are limited and imperfect. The fourth principle calls us to stay curious, open, and humble, recognizing that truth is something we seek together, not something any one of us possesses alone. So today in RE, we're going to talk about maps still, but about a different kind of map. This is called a planisphere, and this is better known as a star map. And if you're interested in having your very own star map, there's some on the RE table that you can pick up to take home. But with that, I'll have all of our children and youth join us at the back of the sanctuary as we head off to class.
The mission of Birmingham Unitarian Church is to be a free and welcoming religious community that encourages lives of integrity, learning, service, and joy. One way we live out this mission is by giving half of our weekly offering to a nonprofit organization that shares our values and addresses needs in the community. The recipient of our donations now through August 24th is Heal Palestine, a non-political nonprofit organization founded in January 2024 in response to the unimaginable devastation in Gaza, where thousands of lives were lost in a short period, impacting generations for decades to come. They provide critical care and resources while centering grassroots leadership and community-led recovery. Their work is rooted in dignity, resilience, and the belief that every child deserves the chance to heal and thrive. Heal Palestine envisions a Palestine where all of its children have access to quality healthcare and education, their basic humanitarian needs met, and the tools and opportunities to be leaders and catalysts for positive change in their country, which will no longer have to rely on others to thrive. Their work includes evacuating young victims of violence for specialized treatment in the U.S. Recently, they brought 4 children to Detroit, where they are now receiving prosthetic limbs and care. Here is a short video showing Heal Palestine's work.
As a Day 4 of Camp Heal, and we are so honored to be able to give these kids from Gaza who've all suffered from the atrocities of genocide, the bombings, the starvation, the destruction of their homes, the education system, the entire society that these kids have gone through, losing family members, themselves suffering horrific injuries, giving them a chance to be kids again, to heal, to have some respite from the trauma of genocide. As a humanitarian organization, it's our duty and honor to serve these kids and show them that they're loved and that they are human and we do care about them and we want to give them a better childhood and a better future. So thank you guys for supporting our work, for coming here, for all the volunteers who made it possible to do this work. This is what Heal Palestine is all about, and we're going to keep going until freedom.
The ushers will now receive this morning's offering, given and received in a spirit of generosity and gratitude. This offering is dedicated to the good work of Heal Palestine and of this congregation.
We hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows. The joys and sorrows of the congregations that are shared with us this morning are just one, and it's a sorrow from Terry Milbauer. My friend Lee ended his life. Please keep his widow Joni and his family in your hearts. We pray, in whatever way we pray, for all those affected by war, by hatred and violence. The cares of the world are many. Even when the cares of the world weigh on us, may we find joy in our connections with each other and in the pleasures that life holds. Let us take care of one another and ourselves in all the ways we can. Let us make this a safe and welcoming place for all. I'd like to read Breath by Rainer Maria Rilke. Breath, you invisible poem, pure, continuous exchange with all that is, flow and counterflow where rhythmically I come to be. Each time, a wave that occurs just once in a sea, I discover I am. You, innermost of oceans, you, infinitude of space, how many far places were once within me? Some winds are like my own child. When I breathe them now, do they know me again? Air, you silken surround, completion and seed of my word.
This is an excerpt from Introductions to Systems and Systems Thinking from the Network of Conservation Educators and Practitioners, Center for Biodiversity and Conservation at the American Museum of Natural History. Mouthful. In order to think in systems, we must first understand what this term means. We encounter systems in many different contexts and situations, from circulatory systems to climate systems to healthcare systems to transportation systems. But what is a system? How would we know a system if we saw one? And why is it important to understand systems at all? A system is a group of two or more related parts that interact over time to form a whole that has a purpose or a function. We can conceive of systems as physical entities that we can observe and empirically examine, like a tree or a subway system, or as abstract constructs that we can use to understand our world, like a model of a cell or of the solar system. A system includes both parts and the relationship that hold the parts together. These can be physical flows, for example, the neural signals that allow us to sense our environment, or simply flows of information in a social system. Furthermore, these components can function together in ways that would not be possible for each part on its own, and as a system, exhibit properties that emerge only when parts interact with a wider whole. These are also known as emergent properties. Investigating the parts and interrelationships of systems helps us understand how they function, a term usually used for non-human systems like a computer, or their purpose, a term usually used for human systems like a government. Often the best way to discern the function, for example, delivering potable water from a faucet, or purpose, for example, educating a student, of a system is to observe how the system operates over time, in terms of growth, decline, oscillation, stasis, or evolution.
Before I play this morning's anthem, I wanted to share a little bit about why I chose Bach for this morning's theme. It's not just because I love Bach, which a lot of you know, but it's also because when we're thinking about systems in music, we often come back to Bach in classical music to consider the foundation of what he set up for generations that followed him. And so the selections I'm playing this morning are from one of his partitas, which is a very standard formulaic kind of composition in music. All of the movements traditionally come in a particular order, and they're based on very kind of refined dances that people would have known at the time. And so I thought that this would be an appropriate musical contribution to the theme. So I hope you enjoy. This will be the last two movements of the C minor partita.
Sometimes, in the attempt to grab the attention of my students, I tell them that if they can master the material in my course, they will be able to see the future. No, I don't teach interpretation of dreams or reading tarot cards. I teach engineering. Did you know that engineers can see the future? If you have ever walked away uninjured from a car crash, or flown from one city to another in 1/10 the time it would take you to drive, or Googled something on your cell phone, you lived the future that some engineers saw at some time in the past. But engineers aren't the only people endowed with this superpower. Scientists have it, lawmakers have it, economists have it, carpenters have it, sculptors have it, novelists and accountants have it. In fact, every human on the planet has the ability to see the future. The method we use to see the future is so innate for humans that most of us don't even think about how we do it. Here's how it works in a nutshell. We focus on a manageable chunk of the universe we call a system. We create a simplified version of that system called a model, and we run the model forward in time faster than real time to see what happens to that part of the universe. You might not realize it, but you do this all the time. Now, I made the point in my opening words, and we saw an example in Shannon's story, that all models are wrong, but some are useful. This quote from George E.P. Bach actually refers to statistical models. But in my studies and in my work and in my life experience, I've come to see that it applies to all models. All models are wrong because they are finite representations of infinite complexity. But some are useful because they give us insight into how things work and thereby allow us to see the future. Let me explain the process in a little more detail. First, what's a system? Our reading this morning gave us a pretty good description of a system. A system is a group of parts that interact for a purpose. Parts that interact for a purpose. And we heard some examples of systems: circulatory systems, climate systems, healthcare systems. None of these infinitely complex systems can fit inside a finite framework in its entirety. Why do I say systems are infinitely complex? Consider an assembly line in a factory. This is a system that I'm all too familiar with. It is made of thousands of moving and stationary parts made of different materials, with tens of thousands of nuts and bolts and robots and gears and pulleys and motors and welding guns and more. All these components interact. A component might move or get hot or attach itself to another under the influence of other components. You might say, well, that's complex, but why infinitely complex? That's because each of these components is a subsystem of the system. Consider just a single bolt. It is made up of a structure, a subsystem of grains of metal, a lot like grains of wood. These are where all the atoms are arranged in a similar configuration in each grain. The grains interact by rubbing past each other, which, under a force, which gives the bolt its strength and its flexibility. But even the atoms and the grains of the metal of the bolt are subsystems. They are made up of smaller things we call particles, which are really complicated interactions of fields of forces we have no direct experience of. I could go on, but I think you get the idea. The assembly line system is infinitely complex because I can keep breaking it down into smaller and smaller subsystems. But creating finite models of infinitely complex systems is what we humans do very well. The very nature of the brain is a modeling process. Neurons are just components in a network, a system, that interact with each other and model our experience of the universe as thought. As thought. So, how do we explicitly create models? Let me start with a few examples. If you have any memories of chemistry class, you might recall those little Tinker Toy models that had little balls representing atoms connected by dowels at certain angles to each other. Those are physical models of the geometry of molecules. Engineering has some interesting models. Anyone ever see a crash test dummy? That is an anthropomorphic model. There are economic models like the law of supply and demand, where people interact with products. We are very familiar with the model of the US federal government, which is made up of 3 co-equal branches that interact through checks and balances. We might need to revise that model. How many of you have spreadsheets holding your monthly household expenses and income? That's an accounting model. They all help you see the future. But there are also models around us in disguise. Some are entirely conceptual and built out of words, like this one. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Poems, plays, novels, these are just another kind of a model of a part of the universe. What do all these examples have in common? Each is a finite simplification of a subset of the infinitely complex universe. The simplification is not arbitrary. We humans use 2 very important methods that our brains are really good at: abstraction and generalization. We create a model of a system by abstracting the components and generalizing their interactions. When we abstract a component, we ignore all the attributes of the component that don't matter. We generalize interactions by finding common patterns between inputs and outputs. That chemistry model is a very drastic abstraction of atoms. Atoms aren't really spherical and they don't have hard surfaces, but they do have an average location abstracted by the center of that sphere in the model. The relationship between the atoms we care about for that model are geometrical and are generalized as the angles at which the holes in the spheres allow the dowels to sit. The crash test dummy is an abstraction of a human body. It's nowhere near as complex as a human body, but the important parts, the femur, the rib cage, the skull, all have the same mass and are connected to the same way as the human body. Emily Dickinson, in her poem Hope, abstracts hope as a bird with the attribute of feathers, and the soul as a tree with the attribute of places to perch. The relationship between hope and your soul is implied to be the same as between a bird and a tree. The abstraction and the generalization taken together is called a metaphor. A metaphor is just another kind of model. Now, because of abstraction and generalization, all these models have to be wrong. They do not capture the infinite complexity of a system, but that's by design. That's what makes some of them useful. If I take the chemistry model, I can see the future of a molecule like a protein that folds into a certain shape because of the geometrical relationship of the atoms. This is very useful if I want to know how to fix health problems caused by proteins folding into a pathological shape. If I take that crash test dummy, I can see the forces conducted through a human body in some future car crash. This is very useful when I want to design a car that protects the people inside it. In all these cases, I can use these models to see not just a future, but all possible futures. With this knowledge, I can choose how to adjust the system now to arrive at the best possible state in the future. Engineers call this optimization. Most other people call it just making good decisions. Now, as you know, I am a systems engineer. They say that when the only tool you hold is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. But I really believe most human endeavors are an exercise in modeling systems. Modeling is explicit in science and engineering and economics and some other disciplines, but religion, mythology, government, literature, art, music, even dance, use modeling to simplify part of the infinitely complex universe into a package a finite brain can hold. I don't know if other animals have this capacity, but even if they do, the frequency and fury with which humans do this might be the only thing that differentiates us from other animals. So now that we know how we model systems to see the future, let's look at our future together. We are a community, a social system, infinitely complex. If we were to model our social system, how would we do it? Well, the components in the social system are individual people. We have to abstract infinitely complex humans to limited attributes, and we have to generalize their interactions. Some people do this by abstracting humans as sinful and in need of saving. Many Christian religions use this abstraction for individuals. Many Christians model interactions between individuals based on the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do to you. From this model, they see a future called the kingdom of God. Some people model social systems by abstracting humans to have the attributes of the group they belong to, like race, ethnicity, class, gender. Critical theorists take this approach. They generalize interactions between groups as oppressing or being oppressed. This model shows them a future where oppressed groups are emancipated. Some people model social systems by abstracting individuals as rational decision makers. Economists tend to do this. The interactions of the individuals in an economic model are based on the motivation of self-interest. This model predicts how the pieces of a pie might get allocated. A little over 10 years ago, I encountered a group of people who have a model of a social system that really appeals to me. They abstract individuals to have the attributes of worth and dignity and the right of conscience. They model the interactions between individuals on the basis of justice, equity, and compassion, and of acceptance of one another. They define relationships within the system and to the rest of the world in democratic processes. They regard their social system as a subsystem of a larger system they call the interconnected web of all existence. Do these words sound familiar? They should. Can you guess which group of people I'm talking about? These abstractions and generalizations are all found in the Unitarian Universalist principles. I wonder if the framers of these principles were aware that they were creating a model of a social system that would allow them to see a future of individuals engaged in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and a world community based on peace, liberty, and justice. Of course, these and all models of social systems are wrong, but I know which one is the most useful to me. Please stand as you are willing and able to sing our closing hymn, number 158 in the Gray Hymnal, Praise the Source of Faith and Learning. For Unitarian Universalists, the chalice is an important model. The stem elevates the bowl nurtures the flame casts light and warmth to the world. Our principles elevate our community nurtures love. Love motivates our lives in the world. Although now we extinguish the chalice flame, let us hold the model in our minds and its usefulness in our hearts. Go now into this world as a beacon of hope and joy. Go in love, go in peace. Now that our worship has ended, our service begins. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be. Please remain seated for a moment of reflection as we listen to the postlude.